There is objection. Question number 9, David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, how many schools received government funding for adult and community education classes in 2009? And how many schools are receiving government funding for adult and community education programs in 2011?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, 49 schools currently receive taxpayer-funded ACE. This is made up of 23 schools funded directly and a further 26 that partner with those directly funded schools. Of course, many other schools continue to offer hobby courses on a user-pays basis. Before the government's reprioritising of taxpayer-funded ACE to target foundation schools, including literacy, numeracy, English language, te reo Māori and sign language, there were 212 funded schools.
David Shearer.
Mr. Speaker, does he think people in Northland, with some of the country's highest unemployment, are being afforded an adequate opportunity to upskill, given that there is now just one school providing ACE where there used to be 12?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, I should point out to the member there are a range of ways in which people can access foundation education in New Zealand. And yes, schools ACE is one. We also have ACE in TEIs, 27 of them, in 24 community groups, 7 OTEPs and 2 REAPs. We also have foundation education, where we've increased embedded literacy and numeracy from 15,000 places to 70,000 places. We have youth guarantee, where there's 2,500 places, which will go to 7,500 next year. We also have trades academies and service academies, just to name a few opportunities.
Mr. Speaker, will he consider restoring the $13 million pulled out of ACE funding to enable the 165,000 New Zealanders, according to ACE Aotearoa, that were forced to leave school and community classes, and to enable them to return to challenges?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, no, the government doesn't have plans to restore that funding because, as we know, there are many challenges for government finances in this time, and of course the Labour opposition can add it to their long list of restarting funding things that they're going to do by borrowing more money. But I would point out that actually a number of schools are doing ACE without any funding whatsoever. For example, the Western Springs College, which is doing, amongst other things, the fabled Moroccan cooking class and Spanish tapas. The Rangiora High School, which is teaching patchwork and botanical drawing, and all these things.
Order. I think we'd heard sufficient of that answer. David Shearer.
Supplementary. Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister think that Mandarin courses provided by Mana College, or sign languages courses at Tikipanga, Rutherford College, Kelston Boys College, Tauranga Boys and Tauranga Girls, before funding cuts were introduced, are hobby classes and poor value for money?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, now the government has prioritised its funding, as you know, to, as the member knows, two languages, literacy, numeracy and ESOL, and then those are allocated by the TEC based on funding applications. What I don't believe taxpayers should be doing is funding woodwork courses and beginners guitar courses, and that's what we've stopped funding. I invite David Shearer to repeat his question. I've been concerned about a couple of the answers because the Minister may not have the particular information that was being sought, but the questions were pretty straight questions relating to some sign language programs in certain schools and nothing to do with woodwork for... Well, hear the Minister briefly. The point I was trying to make, Mr. Speaker, is that is to outline for the member the government's funding approach, which is to fund certain types of courses.
I've heard sufficient. That's all very well, but actually this is question time, where certain questions are asked and answers to them are expected. And while the Minister points the Minister may wish to make, if they don't relate to the question asked, then they're not relevant to that question. And I'd have no problem if the Minister had gone on to include more information if the question had been answered, but I'm not sure the question was. I accept I could be wrong here, but then to avoid any further problem of my being wrong, I just invite... If this was an isolated question, I would not be doing this, but earlier supplementary questions I feel were, there was a question about schools in Northland and to do with specific programs in schools in Northland. Now, it may well be the Minister didn't have the information on them, but the answer didn't relate a great deal to schools in Northland, and that's why I'm inviting the member to repeat his question at this stage. David Shearer.
Does the Minister think that Mandarin courses provided by Mana College or sign language courses at Tikipanga High School, Rutherford College, Kelston Boys College, Tauranga Boys and Tauranga Girls Colleges, before the funding cuts were introduced, were all hobby classes and poor value for money?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, the point, as I was saying to the member before, is that I don't have opinion on, obviously, those individual courses, because I'm not privy to them in particular, but we do have, the government's role is to set policy in relation to what it's prepared to fund, and it is prepared to fund language courses, ESOL courses, and also literacy and numeracy courses. It is then for the TEC to take a decision as to which courses it funds, and those schools apply for them, and I think that's an entirely correct approach. And then I went on to say, Mr Speaker, that the government doesn't believe it should fund hobby courses, and I listed some examples of what it doesn't believe it should fund.
David Shearer.
Question, Mr Speaker. What does the Minister believe is better value for money? $116 to fund someone to enrol in an ACE course with a school or community organisation, or $116 to buy 3 millimetres of tarmac on his holiday highway?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, that's hardly worth a response to the member, except I would point out again the following, that the government spends massive amounts, as it should do, on improving literacy and numeracy in this country, including foundation courses, including trade academies, including service academies, including youth guarantee, including 16,600 more core places in universities and polytechnics, and I back this government's record in improving adult literacy and numeracy in this country well ahead of the previous governments.
Question number 10, the Honourable... Point of order, the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I want to correct an answer I gave earlier to clear up any potential misunderstanding. So I need to do that.
Give the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Thanks. So in question...
I probably should put leave. Order, no. The leave should be sought to do that. Leave is sought to correct, make a personal explanation to correct an answer. Is there any objection? So there is no objection.
Okay. In question number 1, Phil Goff asked me if I stood by my claim that 60% of young people not in education, employment or training are actually in school or university. I've never made that claim, and I never made that claim yesterday. I interpreted his answer as being the number I gave yesterday as being unemployed young people who I were talking about yesterday. So of course it's the case that young people not in education, employment or training are not in education by definition. I've never made that claim. What I said, and is correct, is it's true that 60% of unemployed people in the Household Labour Force survey, aged 15 to 19, are at school or at university.
Question number 10, the Honourable Sir Roger Douglas.
Mr Speaker, my